strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, heart. Not the last one. So, you've made your awesome backstory, you've figured out what your character looks like, and you've even developed an awesome voice for your character. Now, what do we do about these? Don't worry, we got you covered. Welcome to Demystifying D&D. I'm today's host, Justin Powell, and today we'll be breaking down ability scores and how to use them for role-playing purposes. But before we dig in, be sure to give a like and subscribe for more great D&D content. Now let's get into it. An ability score is a number that helps us understand how skilled your character is in a particular ability. It also relates to different skill checks you might make throughout the game, as well as combat and other things that might come up. The 6 abilities are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. The highest number you can get as a player character is a 20 on these scores. With each score, there are modifiers as well that will eventually be added to different checks you make throughout gameplay. So if you had a 10 for your strength score, that's considered the middle of the road. You get no modifiers for that either way. But every even number up, you get a +1 added to strength-based rolls. So a 12 gets you a +1, a 14 gets you a +2, a 16 gets you a +3, and you get it. That also works in reverse. So if you go down to an 8, then you have a -1 in strength checks. If you go down to a 6, you have a -2, and so on. Those modifiers can be added to ability checks, to saving throws, or to skill checks. So let's say I have a 14 in strength, but I'm not proficient in athletics. That means when I make an athletics check, I still get to use that +2 to my roll. Now we're going to discuss each individual ability, and I'll go over how those scores might affect your character and how you can roleplay those effects. Strength measures your character's power. It determines whether you're able to kick down a door or pull your ally up who's hanging from a cliff. If you're a fighter or barbarian, you might consider making strength your highest ability score. To clarify the differences between a high score versus a low score, let's check out this amazing chart from DMing with Charisma. I'm going to be referencing this throughout the rest of the video because it was incredibly helpful in organizing my thoughts around this. So, check the link in the description for the article. And hey, while you're there, I don't know, like and subscribe. Hey, why not? Sorry, last plug till the end. So if your character has a strength of 8, they have trouble lifting heavy objects. At 14 to 15, they're incredibly toned and they can throw small objects for pretty long distances. At 20, they can out-wrestle a work animal or even catch someone who's falling. If you have a high strength score, there are a couple things to consider in terms of role-playing your character. Is your character proud of their strength? Do they seek to boast about it by entering arm wrestling contests or even a good old fight club? Oh, I don't think I was supposed to talk about that. That's the first rule. But the second rule was, I don't remember. Maybe your character is somewhat ashamed of how strong they are because they've hurt someone in the past and they're not always aware of how strong they really are. Another good thing to consider is, how did they acquire their strength? Were they a trained soldier, or did they perhaps grow up on a farm working every day? There's lots of different ways that people build muscle, so a good question to ask yourself is, how did your character do that? Whatever you decide, consider what your character perceives of their own strength and how that might manifest into roleplay. Now I'll show off some of my strength. It's like it's industrial strength paper, so it's pretty hard to rip. Dexterity will tell you how light on your feet your character is and how quick their reflexes are. It also is an easy way to boost your armor class because a character with a higher dexterity score is tougher to hit. They're a little bit faster. It also relates to a lot of different skill checks. So it can relate to picking a lock, to breaking free of bonds, or to catching an object thrown your way, like this. So that was an example of low dexterity, which I did on purpose so that you all could have a good educational representation, because I myself I'm very fast. If you have a score of 8, your character is slow and occasionally trips over their own feet. At 14 to 15, your character is pretty good at dodging or catching medium-speed thrown projectiles. And at 20, your character is downright graceful, able to shift to different actions and movements both quickly and fluidly. Try to consider what your dexterity score means for your character. If you have a low dexterity score, maybe your character's a bit slower to rush into anything, be it a battle or a conversation with an innkeeper. If they have a fast dexterity score, maybe they're always impatient, not really able to sit still, constantly fiddling with something or moving about. Maybe they get distracted, like in the middle of a sentence, they just... Constitution is the skill that measures your health and vitality. A high constitution brings additional hit points for you every single time your character levels. It also measures how well your character deals with poison, exhaustion, fatigue, or even how long they can hold their breath underwater. For spellcasters, a high constitution means it's more likely that you'll be able to maintain concentration on spells, since you can add your constitution modifier to any checks you make. If your character has a constitution of 8, they are often easily winded, almost incapable of a full day of hard labor. At 14 to 15, they're consistently able to move about for 12 hours, and at 20, they almost never get fatigued. Role-playing constitution can be a little bit trickier than dealing with the other skills. One thing you might consider is, how does your player test their constitution? Are they prone to drinking a lot more because they never seem to suffer the effects of a hangover? Maybe they don't understand why they can't keep traveling when the wizard desperately needs a break. Perhaps they're constantly giving fitness tips out to their friends. Intelligence measures how book-smart your character is. It relates to recalling information. It can also be used to win a game based on skill, to forge a document, or even to estimate the price of an object. If your character has an intelligence score of 8, they probably have trouble following different trains of thought and forget most unimportant details. At 14 to 15, they become quite adept at solving logic puzzles or figuring out a tough mathematic problem. At 20, they are probably the smartest person anyone else knows. They probably say the word indubitably a lot. I feel like smart people say that all the time. I find that role-playing intelligence tends to be tougher when you take a low intelligence score. I see a lot of people who will dump their intelligence score because they don't think they need it, but then when they start strategizing around combat, suddenly they come up with plans that would make Sun Tzu clap. I think if you go with a low intelligence, you should absolutely run with that. It can make a very interesting dynamic in the group if your plan is always, I'm gonna run in there and I'm gonna cut his head off. Simple as that. If you have a high intelligence, consider using a plethora of complex verbiage to display the enormity of your intellect. I don't even know what I just said, but it sounded kind of smart. You can also consider what your character thinks of those who perhaps lack their mental faculties. For example, do they think of themselves as a teacher, or are they dumbfounded by people who don't understand the metaphysical ramifications of a deity reincarnated as a tiny kitten? Meow. Wisdom measures the worldly awareness your character has. These characters are very adept at discerning lies from truth and at finding solutions even when they don't have all of the evidence in front of them. Whereas intelligence is based solely off knowledge, wisdom is all about a character trusting their gut. A wisdom score of 8 to 9 means your character forgets or opts not to consider all the options before rushing into an action. At 14 to 15, this means your character is very good at reading people and determining if a situation is on the up and up. At 20, your character is a master at knowing what people really mean behind their words and at reading situations. A character with low wisdom probably doesn't spend too much time in self-reflection. So if your character is asked why they ran in and tickled the dragon, that's probably going to be a new moment of realization for that person, to actually ask the question, why did I do that thing? If they have a high wisdom score, perhaps they rely solely on instinct for all of their actions. They trust their gut 100% of the time. Or maybe they're kind of like an Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, giving out wisdom to anyone they think might need it. Finally, charisma measures how charming, confident, or commanding a character is. It's always good for a party to have at least one person with a high charisma, often called the face of the party. This person is good at gathering information, persuading others, or talking their way out of a sticky situation. If your character has a score of an 8 to 9, perhaps they often bore NPCs or lack the social tact to avoid saying something kind of rude. At 14 to 15, they're probably a bit more adept at navigating through social interactions and have a little bit more to say. And at 20, this character is the life of the party. A high charisma score can come across in many different ways. Maybe the character uses their charisma to joke and flirt with others on a pretty consistent basis. Looking at you, bards. Characters might also use their charisma by giving stern commands and kind praise to their allies. An evil character's charisma might come from their harsh intimidation, forcing everyone to stop what they're doing and listen to them. If you have a low charisma score, that can be fun too. Maybe your character says wildly inappropriate things at the worst times. Maybe they don't even know how to communicate with people, so they just pat them on the head. You can use your imagination and run wild with something like that. You might be thinking to yourself, cool, I totally get it. One last question, how do I get those scores? Well, there are many ways to do that, and your DM will tell you which way they prefer. Here at Character Player, we like to roll for our scores. So to do that, you take 4 d6s and you roll them out. You take away the lowest dice that you got. Whatever you have left, well, that's one of your scores. You do that 5 more times and you have all 6 that you can place into any ability that you want. These stats also relate to the skills of your character. Skills are like a specialized focus that your character is either very adept in or maybe very terrible in. The bonus you see next to an ability score represents the bonus you'll get on any skills related to that ability. So for example, Strength's only skill is athletics. So if I have a +3 to strength, then I get a +3 to athletics. Pretty easy. That bonus will change if my character is proficient in the skill. If that is the case, then you add your proficiency bonus on top of any roll you make for that skill. So if I was a level 3 wizard with a 16 intelligence, and I was making a history check of which I am proficient in, I would first add the +3 for my intelligence. Then I would add the +2 for my proficiency. Put them both together, 5. That proficiency bonus will grow as your character levels up, at a certain point making some rolls almost impossible to fail. Unless you get the dreaded nat 1. That about covers stats. Let us know if you found this video helpful, and if you have any other tips for players, maybe leave a comment below. Also, let us know what you'd like for us to demystify next. Be sure to check out the links to the different articles that helped us make this video down below in the description. And while you're here, why don't you go ahead and, like and subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any new content we have coming for you on Character Player. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and over at twitch.tv/characterplayer. Till next time, no guts, no story.
Check out our other shows like Monsters Lab, 1 Hour One Shot, and our live stream campaigns. We're live every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/characterplayer.